Welcome, Eyes of the Wheel. I'm going to share with you today a piece that I wrote about time. Linear time and how it causes a lot of our suffering when we get trapped in that space. And then after I read this piece I wrote, I will chat a bit about it afterwards. Okay, here it is. Time only exists when you pay attention to it. Yes, this is also true for the time on the clock, which is necessary for practical reasons. But it's not the time I'm talking about. I'm talking about past and future as time. Linear time only exists in the mind as an indirect, fanatically imagined experience created directly and entirely in the form of thoughts. The obsessive attention we put on a handful of previously heightened and painful experiences is in itself their only reality. We maintain our interest and keep these experiences alive only because we identify with them. The mind creates thoughts. Identification with thoughts creates ego. Ego creates suffering. It does this by attaching to pleasurable experiences and resisting painful experiences. Both are unbalanced states, which keep the mind busy in a state of desire and expectation for more heightened experiences, and fearful and insecure about potential painful experiences. Therefore, driven by expectation and fear, the egoic mind tries to control our lives. And in doing so, the mind stays busy. Completely identified by our thoughts, they become our entire experience, which only exists as the past or the future. All our attention is consumed and time feels really, really important. The future never comes. Life unfolding in front of you right now is simultaneously the present and the future at the exact same time. It can never be otherwise. The future as an experience that is separate from what you are currently experiencing right now is an entirely imagined thought form. The past is as much of a dream as the one you had last night. Only when you remain interested in it does it seem like it exists. Without interest, it fades. Time as the past and the future, the mind, the thoughts, and ego are all the same, the root cause of all our suffering. To be liberated from time, the mind, and ego, and to enter into a timeless dimension of right now, we must lose interest in our thoughts. We must stop identifying with them as we are not our thoughts. When we say, "This is what I'm thinking," whether we are aware of it or not, we are actually acknowledging the fact that we are aware thoughts are happening to us. This is what I'm thinking. So we're acknowledging that the thoughts are happening to us, and we are the awareness. We are simply the one that's aware of the thought. That's the subtlety behind that phrase, "This is what I'm thinking. I, the awareness, am aware of and thinking a separate thought from myself. I'm aware of it. If I was the thought, I wouldn't be able to say, this is what I'm thinking, because it's like an action. Like, I am running, right? It's like, I, the awareness, am doing the action of running. Same thing. I, the awareness, am doing the action within myself of thinking. That's what we mean when we're saying on a deeper level that this is what I'm thinking about. Okay? So we are acknowledging, even in that, even if we're not aware, that we are actually not our thought, but we are the awareness behind it that is simply aware of the thought happening. And that's it. We are the awareness. That's how we stop identifying with thinking that we are the thought. We are just the one that's aware of it. In the awareness is pure blissful joy. Know yourself as that. And how powerful that is to just be aware of it. If there are certain words in there you're not too sure, don't get too hung up on it. It's just the essence of a teaching that we are practicing not taking our thoughts and our thinking so seriously. Because when we do, then the past and the future feel really, really, really alive. And they feel like our entire experience. And then there's only glimpses that we're able to jump out of thinking about the past or planning for the future to actually be with life. And in that sort of experience, we know that our thinking has completely taken over and we have identified fully with every single thought that comes through, which means we take them very seriously and we think that's a reflection of who we are as a person is what we're thinking about. Okay? When really the whole paradigm shift is allowing ourselves to acknowledge that we are not what we're thinking about. Our thoughts don't need to be taken as seriously. And we can just sit back into being the space of presence and awareness that simply notices the thought coming. And when we do that, we sit in a spaciousness of this present moment that allows thoughts to not stick. So you may get a thought about the past, a memory, you may get something about the future come through, and then without taking it seriously, it just kind of keeps drifting by. Right? When we take it seriously, then we start to cling to it and then it becomes us and we get really, really engulfed in this experience. And then we think that, the past or the future is like really alive, but it's not. The only place the past and the future are alive are within our minds. So it's important to recognize that and important to recognize that the future also doesn't exist. I believe it was Eckhart Tolle that first explained that to me and I heard that from. But the future as a direct experience, like a direct life experience, it never comes. It never comes. The future comes as this present moment. Like the future and this moment are completely simultaneous. You'll never leave this moment to be in some future place. The only place that we think the future exists is within our thinking. But then when that experience comes that we're thinking about that say is going to happen in the future, when it comes as this moment right now. And if we are really caught up in the thinking mind, we never experience this moment. So then the future comes that we've been thinking about, it comes as the now. And because we're so conditioned to just keep thinking, when that future moment comes, whatever that is, it will be the now. And in the now, you'll be thinking about the next thing. So you completely miss life, is pretty much what happens. And then you get really anxious sometimes, or you suffer because you're always trying to escape this moment to be somewhere else, and you do that through your mind. Okay, so it's a never-ending journey. Or then you cling to the past, right? So then that whole space is really, you're not really with life. You're really in the head, you're really in the linear space. And there's a lot of suffering that happens in that space, right? So I'm practicing this within my own life, and I know I'll be practicing it for the rest of my life, but simply just not taking my thoughts so seriously. So whatever that may be, if it's a thought that feels really heavy, that feels really disempowering, or if it's a thought about, wanting to escape where you're from, or clinging to the past, or something that you know is not ultimately serving your direct life experience, you don't have to take that as seriously. You can just notice it and be like, oh, okay, I'm the awareness and that thought is coming, okay, and that's okay, right? So there's a huge freedom in disidentifying and taking our thoughts less seriously. And I'm still practicing that. So say like something comes through where I'm like, oh, I feel really not very good. Like I feel heavy, I feel insecure. Then I'm practicing just noticing, okay, that's just a thought that I'm labeling onto my present experience. And I don't need to take that seriously. I can just notice that the thought's coming, but I don't need to identify with that and say, oh, I am insecure, I am not good enough, or whatever, if that thought comes through. I don't need to say I am that. I can just experience that, like, oh, I'm feeling that way, but that's not who I am. I'm just aware that that's happening. And that removes so much of the attachment to that linear space and that mind and the ego and the whole thing. And you can actually just sit back in a place where you're present with this experience that's happening right now and not be pulled out of it. And the more that we can do that, the more peaceful, the more content, the more joyous, the more clear we are within our lives. So it's a practice. It's a practice every day, right? Okay. So it felt really good to share that with you. That's a really beautiful piece that I love that I wrote. It really came through and really resonates. And it's just, yeah, it's so beautiful. And it's such an interesting thing to play with, to just notice when these things are happening within the mind, and just allowing yourself to ease off. Okay, I'm not that thought. I'm not that thought. I am the awareness, and take it from there. Okay? Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe to my channel so this message and this written piece can go further. Thank you, Eyes of the Wheel.